It Takes a Village is an educational program that's been established by the Village for Rhode Island foster and adoptive families to provide education and information to families that are interested in foster and adoptive care in Rhode Island. The show is produced entirely by foster families, so we want to welcome everyone to today's show. The topic for today is all about trauma, what trauma means, how it affects children and families, parenting, and some resources that are available to help people, and advice from foster families on how to deal with children that have experienced trauma in their lives. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our show. I will start by introducing our guest for today. On my left, I have Jen Curry, who is a foster parent. And then we have Anne-Marie Dunbar, who is a kinship family member, and Rachel Briggs, who is also a kinship provider and will be the co-host with me for today. So welcome to our guests. Thank you very much for coming to the show. We're going to start with just talking a little bit in general about trauma. All children, I think this is important for everyone to know, that any child who is in foster care has actually experienced trauma just by virtue of the fact that they were removed from their biological family and placed somewhere else, whether it's with a kinship provider who is definitely somebody who knows the child or not. That's a trauma. That's a traumatic experience. And any act that removes a child from where they have known their beginning of their life would obviously be a traumatic experience. And many children that are in foster care have experienced different types of trauma. So we're going to start by just talking in general with, we'll start with Rachel, with telling us a little bit about trauma and the types of trauma.
Yeah. So trauma can be defined as any event or situation that overwhelms a child's ability to cope with that situation. And I think it's important to know, and it interferes with their life and their interaction with their peers. So when you think about that, I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding how an infant can be affected by trauma, right? But they're in their biological mom's body. And there's a lot of events going on, right, as they're developing. And if that birth mother is living a dramatic life in situations that she's not able to cope with, by default, the baby is not able to cope with that. So infants can be traumatized, okay? So
I'm glad you brought that up because most people would not even think about that. When they think of trauma, they think of an adult or an adolescent even, but that's, and I think that that's one of the points that we want to make clear to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, the old saying is, whatever the mom puts in their body, that's what the baby gets in utero. Well, it's the same thing. If she's yelling and high anxiety and being abused herself, that is what the baby's going to get. So trauma can happen to anyone. And it's our ability to cope. So once you have an infant here physically on earth with you, if they're being neglected, not fed, not even attended to, not looked at, not held, that's traumatic because they cannot cope with that. They don't have the ability to soothe themselves, right? So that's traumatic. And then we clearly can understand older children as we get up into development, how being abused, being neglected, which is the worst form of trauma. Because it's, I like to say, neglect never. You never know when you're gonna be taken care of. And that's the worst, because that does create anxiety in our children. So neglect, abuse, all those things are events or situations that our children cannot cope with, just by virtue of being a child. They don't have control to get up and pack their bags and go, this is a bad environment. I don't think I should be here, and get up and leave. They don't have that ability to do that. So they are traumatized, yeah. And then, I mean, Jen, you are a foster family.
Yes.
And you have children. how do you feel your children have been affected by trauma? Can you think of like one situation where you're like, that was traumatic for my child?
Well, I will tell you that our little one, I have a range of boys, ages 7 to 25, and my 17-year-old and my husband just the other day were talking about, oh, remember when you used to be the wrestling coach? And my son said, oh, I think I could still take you on the mat. So they started this like playing wrestling. And my, 2 grown men at this point now trying to like go around and get the other one. And the 3-year-old walked into the room and she went hysterical. And they both stopped and they kind of were like laughing at first, like, are you serious? Like, it's fine. And then my husband picked her up, Daddy's okay, I wasn't hurting him, everything is okay. It took her a good 10 to 15 minutes to come down from that. And this is a child that we had from 3 days old.
That's what I was gonna ask. How
She
long-
was reunified at 15 months old for 6 weeks. During that 6-week time, I had contact with her mom and I was helping to babysit her and her brother. So they spent about half the time in our home. So we're talking about 3 weeks. She witnessed something. I said to my husband, I said, she saw something. Here we were thinking she never saw and experienced anything, right? Because we got her at 3 days old.
Right.
I said, but she definitely
It's
experienced
the in
it.
utero process.
Well,
She was
that, and I
feeling all
think-
of that too.
I think in those three weeks that
yeah.
she saw domestic violence. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't doubt it. I mean, this was just a couple days ago.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
And she's been in our home for 2 years since she was
right.
removed.
So you would think, and I hear that a lot. People say when I express my children and how they're showing their trauma,
Right.
they say, well, haven't they been with you for 10 years?
Yeah,
Aren't they better now?
right.
No, they're not yet.
And my husband and my son weren't even loud about it because they were like methodical. It was like a chess game. They were trying, like stretching the arm. They weren't like yelling. They were
Right.
quiet about it, and it was
Still traumatic.
it was eye opening to me
Yeah.
to see that.
Thank you for sharing that. Anne Marie, in your life with your family, how have you seen trauma manifest itself through your children?
In the situation that I have, my little came to me when she was a year and a half old. She was, and her siblings at the same time were in different places. And she was with me for a year, and then she was reunified for a couple of years with Mom. And my older grandchildren that live with me were very, very traumatized by the removal because we weren't expecting the way that it occurred. And it took a long time for them to be able to understand that, we did everything that, you can. You always continue to love and care and reach out. And she came back to us after a couple of years, and she's was with me for 5 years. I got guardianship last month. And it's hard when the reunification happened because my older ones were on edge all the time. Well, are they going to take her again? Is she going to be leaving?
Right. So like the constant questioning and
Correct.
worrying and
Right.
what's wanting to know what's gonna happen.
And the time process to get through all of the things so that families can work on the reunification and do the things that are being offered and need to be done. And there's the uncertainty of when is this, is she going to or isn't she? And then the years are passing and you're still living in this limbo, which again is raising everybody's anxiety, particularly the little.
Right.
Because you are constantly saying, it's between the judge and Mom and things that have to be done and everybody's doing their best and we continue to love. We're a family regardless of anything.
Right.
And that continuity of reminding we're a family. And again, that's kinship or non-kinship. We're a family. Families take care of each other. That's what we're doing. We're taking care of each other and trying to be the best we can be.
Yeah. I mean, I often am asked the question, like, really, because I mean, when you hear the word trauma, you think very technical, right? And I think people have a idea in their minds, oh, that adult was traumatized because they're on drugs or they're this or that. And they tend to look at children's behavior as that's just a kid being defiant, or that's just a kid not wanting to do anything, or
they're just
being
excited.
lazy, or they're just excited, right? But trauma affects our brain. It affects our brain. And we all know our brain has certain functions, right? So if you have something affecting your brain, it's going to affect every part of you because our brain controls every part of us. You know, I like to have a visual of trauma, and I like to think about if someone came running into this room right now and just screamed, right, and ran out, we'd all be like, oh, what was that, right? But our body would take it in, and then it would calm down because we're not being exposed to that anymore. Now imagine they came back in and they yelled again, and we're like, oh, we'd get excited again, right? Our body would go into that natural, I need to save you, right? Now imagine if that kept happening. Or it kept happening and then it stopped. Now you're going, is it gonna happen? I'm waiting for the door to open. You spoke about your 3-year-old coming in and seeing them wrestling.
Yeah.
And you thought, she hasn't been around that, but that was a trigger for her, right? And in our trauma, in our children's trauma, they have triggers, right? So I now, if someone came in here yelling all the time, they're gone. But now that sound of the door opening, that's a trigger for me now. I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna be hyper vigilant to hear that sound. So can I focus on my schoolwork? Can I focus on a conversation?
Can you fall asleep?
Can I fall asleep?
Can I stay asleep?
Can I
too?
stay asleep,
Yes.
right?
Should I get up and go to the bathroom or just go right here in the bed? And there's so many things that happen.
Right, and we take so much time to figure out the triggers.
Yeah.
Right? I compare trauma to a Jack-in-the-Box. You know that toy?
Yeah. Yep.
And the handle's
going.
cranking. But I think it's important to know our children are not cranking the wheel. I had older children, right? And people would say, doesn't she know better than that? Oh, she just wants to do that. No, life cranks that wheel. And at any time, pop, we have a response to the trauma.
And it can be anywhere. It can be at the playground, it can be in school, it can be at home, it can be lighting, sensory type issues. There's so many things that trigger because regardless of what the trauma was, there's a continuity of hypervigilance going on in that child's body. And they don't know what they're waiting for, but there's gonna be something. What's it gonna be?
Right.
And when you were saying that people think that children are being defiant or they're acting inappropriately or they're, whatever the situation is. If you saw a child in a wheelchair with oxygen tank and tubing, or know of a child who has to have a lot of operations, or somebody with a broken leg on crutches and has to do it for a couple of years because they're going to have surgeries and things to. You empathize with the child and the family because your heart is saying, oh my gosh, this child has a way to go. But when you see a child when you don't see a child with these types of things, but you see all of these behaviors that we quote unquote call negative behaviors, this is the mental health piece of it. This is the trauma to the child. And this is this child showing, and I don't want to say it's a disability.
It's the symptoms.
It's the symptoms of what's going wrong or what's
Absolutely.
happening to them.
So when we think about our children and just our families, how can a family help a child who's been traumatized? Because I like to say, I don't want to stay in the woods. This is very sad. It's like dark, right?
Right.
But we want to come out of the woods.
We want to look for that light
We
all the
want to
time.
look for. So if you can think about one way, how have you helped?
So with my little guys, they have trouble regulating their emotions, whether they're happy, whether they're sad, and I just said to my 15-year-old the other day, we were driving home, just a short distance, and he's got them giggling and laughing, and they're having fun, but they can't wind down from that.
Right.
So I know that as soon as we get in the house now, someone's going to get hit, someone's going to get bit, something's going to happen
Right.
because they're like an overwound toy, and it's going to spiral out of control. So I had to bring them in and have them sit at their little table, and we took out putty, or we
Nice,
have
yeah.
a slime timer, or something that helps them ground and calm down.
That's
because
great.
they can't do that on their own.
Yeah, that's great.
Another thing that I found super helpful when they, I didn't know it was helpful all along. We have this lullaby CD that plays. It's just,
Oh, yeah.
it's hymns and Bible songs is
Yep.
the title, and it's just instrumental. And I would play it for the 3-year-old from the time she was a baby. It plays for 1 hour, it would shut off, and that would be it. Well, when she came back, and she and her brother came back after they had been together for that short period of time, they would both awake up in the middle of the night, and they're in the same room, and I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. And I said, she never woke up like this. Of course, you know, she didn't know where she was.
Right.
And the music was only playing for 3 hours, so I put it on repeat and had it play the whole night.
Yep.
Yep.
The CD player just broke about a month ago, and they're okay now. But anytime I didn't hit repeat, those kids woke up in the middle of the night. And I think they were waking up naturally, because we all kind of wake up a little. And then when they heard that music, they're, oh, I know where I am. And it was okay to fall asleep.
That's beautiful.
They felt safe.
It felt safe. So I would tell a foster parent, play soft music like that and associate that with
Absolutely.
your house where there's safety, no matter the age of the child, or something that, some white noise, something that identifies this is where you are.
Right.
So that because we all naturally wake up a little bit in the middle of the night, when they wake up and they're on that high alert,
Absolutely.
That's
if they
great.
hear
advice,
that
yeah.
sound and say, oh, it's safe to go back to sleep.
That's great, Anne Marie. What have you and your family? What's helped with the children?
Just to touch on what Jen just said, what I was doing was using those lights that you can put on the wall, and I would turn it on just part of the way, so that when she woke, she could see where she's at. Because she's been difficult to get to sleep, and then part of her nighttime routine has always been, even still, is to sing "You Are My Sunshine" to her, and you could feel her body release as you were pulling the covers and everything up on her. And even now, her situation's a little bit different right now, and I'll sing it to her on the phone.
Oh,
And
nice.
she, all of a sudden, like sometimes I'll ask her and she'll say, "No, I'm okay tonight." And then other nights she'll say, "Grammy, you're gonna sing, right?"
Oh, that's great.
And that's, when you have a child who has trauma and has many diagnoses and things like that, you have to really, we become hypervigilant. Because we're looking for the triggers, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what do I have close to me that I can use to divert what's getting ready?
And I think
or
what you said about routine is so important too, because these kids are in a situation where they don't know what's happening next. And so they're always on high alert, listening for the noises, listening for the signals, so that next time if it happens, they'll know the trigger and they'll be ready. Little things like, we eat every single day at the same time. We go to bed at the same time. They have to stay in their room until I say, okay, now it's time to get up. Like everything, it seems so rote and so regimented, but they count on that.
yes,
They used
that
to get panicky.
consistency.
Like they'd see me in the kitchen, and I'm like, no, I'm cooking. Food isn't ready in 30 seconds. Like, I'm making a meal. It's okay. It's going to be. And now they trust when they see the pans come out. They're not whining. They want to eat. They know, oh, she's making dinner.
I was just going to say that the consistency is really important.
Yeah.
I use a visual chart so that he can see what his schedule is and he knows what's going to come next. And it's pictures of him doing certain activities or whatever it is that he enjoys, so he knows that's him. And there's like a Velcro on the back of it so he can take it off and put it on the chart himself. And he's 3, and he likes that. He likes being able to do that, or to choose the activity that's going to be calming for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the consistent, caring caregiver, right? Because I think if we look back, that's probably what lack
Three
of that.
Cs, I like
the
it.
3 Cs. That's probably the lack of that what caused the trauma. So now being foster families, if we can give that to our children who have the trauma, it could help them. What have you all done? Because this is what we do for the children, but what helps you all to cope with the trauma? Because it is traumatic, because now we're in a situation being subject to events that sometimes are hard to cope with. So now
Secondary
we're being
trauma.
we're
Secondary
being
trauma.
traumatized,
yeah.
So what have you all done to help you with your secondary trauma?
Having a small group of friends. I have 2 or 3. One is not a foster mom, and she's phenomenal because she's not been there and she still gets it. But having a couple foster mom friends that have kind of a little bit further along the road than I am, support groups that we have with at the village, and research. I love to research things. I just got this book. It's What Happened to You. Instead of like what's wrong with you, it's like, well, what happened to you? And it's by Dr. Bruce Perry, who I've found is in the world of trauma, he's like the top-notch guy. I didn't know that. And Oprah Winfrey has input on this, and I just started reading it the other day, and it's phenomenal. One of the things that I most recently read was talking about that if a child at 2 months, for the first 2 months of life, if it's traumatic, they can go on to have 12 years of good, wholesome life, but they're still affected. Where if you flip it the other way, in their first 2 months of life were grounded and solid, and they go on to have 12 years of turbulent, awful life, that child is better off than the one that had the 2 months.
Yeah.
With
Is that a
with
new
the bad
book?
start.
Did it
It's a
just
brand
come
new
out?
book. It just came out the 27th. I pre-ordered it. It came to me
Wow.
on Amazon.
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press, and I can't get enough of it. I've been carrying it around with me everywhere because I.
That's a great resource. We'll have to put that up on our website so people
Oh,
can.
it's phenomenal. It's really good.
And that,
And I'm only halfway through, and
yeah, that quote makes perfect sense in my mind because I like food, so I compare everything to food. And
It's a
if
good
you're
comparison.
baking, if you're baking something and you're putting all those ingredients in there initially, right? Once it's baked, and that's what it is, right?
Right.
You can't go in and take the flour out the cake, right? You
Right.
can't separate the pieces. So it makes complete sense to me that a child exposed to adverse childhood experiences is going to have a tougher time later in life.
Right.
It totally makes
or
sense.
if you start out with the wrong ingredients. If you ever go to make chocolate chip cookies and the butter's not softened, you try to soften it, and the
Right.
cookies come out like
That's our
because
trauma, right?
right.
That's the
That's
trauma.
the butter. The butter got a little trauma,
Right,
and the whole
right.
result is
Absolutely. Anne Marie, what do you do for yourself to help cope with the trauma?
Okay, so remember I said I had her for a year, and now it's been a 5-year process. What Jen was just saying, I keep my circle small, and sometimes you should reach out sooner. When I got her the second time, because the first year everything was like, she was doing so well and everything was so good. And then the second time, I started going to the village and going to a lot of the different support groups and Foster Forward, some stuff with them too. And there's a lot of stuff out there. And as I've gotten further and further along and heard different things, you get to the point where you say to yourself, oh my gosh, I wish that this had been internalized and given to me at the very beginning,
Right.
so that you could look at the long-term perspective. But as you're doing it, you're caught in that moment to moment because reunification is everybody's goal. That's what you want to see happen. And it's important to keep your mindset in, we're going to get there. Some things take longer than others. We're going to get there.
And you
Sometimes you have
don't
to take
know.
that cake out and pop the knife in to see if it's fully cooked yet. So there's a lot of back and forth.
Yes.
And there's that, the mindset is keep helping this little be the best possible little she can be.
right.
But all these other things start coming in and manifesting. And when you're getting the calls from school and when you're on the playground and the child's dissolving and all of that, more of the information to help you is the best thing that can happen. Ask, never be afraid to ask questions.
Right. This is all great.
And I got
advice,
my own
yeah.
therapist too, who happens to be
Great.
a rad specialist. And just doing more of this, opening up more.
I think it was advice as well as what you're doing to help yourself. So it's great. I do something that does not involve foster care at all. I go dancing.
there you go.
And
Excellent.
that is great because it's not only like socializing,
a
but it's
release.
exercising too. And I feel it feels great to go out and dance. So
The one thing I do for myself is to try and go buy water
time?
as much as possible, because that's my time. I don't answer my phone. I have a couple of books with me. I just want to sit and breathe in the prettiness of what's out here around us, and that kind of rejuvenates my brain.
I think it's important for people to know that nobody's in it alone.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, nobody's in it alone. I mean, you said it, reach out to a couple of friends. You said the support groups, Anne Marie. And I think that that's one of the things that we want to communicate, that you're not there by yourself.
Right.
That
Oh,
there
this
are
woman-
people that you can reach out to that are involved with the village or other organizations in the state, the support groups that are out there, who have way more experience than you that can help. Yeah. Did you
Oh, I
want to say?
just wanted to connect this too. In this case, there's siblings, and one of the other children's, again, kinship grandmother, and I became very friendly and kept that real connectivity going, which I think is so important if there's siblings and they're not all placed together, that you keep that continuity as much as possible.
Absolutely.
That is such a loss for children.
We're actually coming to almost the end of the program, so I think we're going to have to ask the last question, which
what advice would you give to a family, and they just came to a support group and they're like, my son or my daughter is displaying these behaviors, I'm feeling this way. What advice would you give them? Or a prospective family, someone who's like, I was thinking of taking a child into my home. What advice would you give them?
If you're thinking of taking a child, be prepared for the honeymoon period, because in the beginning you're like, everything's fine, this is fine. That'll wear off, and then you'll see the real child that you have in your home. But to get the child involved in some kind of a, if they're young, play therapy and some kind of a counseling. Don't wait on the social worker to suggest these things. Be proactive and
Yeah, that's great
Yeah.
advice. Yeah. Anne Marie, what would you say?
I was just going to piggyback there on what Jen said, and also add in for yourself. Start early. Get yourself connected with a counselor or a therapist, some type of one-on-one where you can express yourself and get that feedback, so that you're feeling balanced, and you know that somebody hears you too, because you're talking to a lot of different people and doing a lot of different things for everybody else. It needs to be about you too, to be able to balance.
You know, I saw a good quote. It said, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And you can't. And our kids need a lot.
Right.
And if we don't take care of ourselves first,
Right.
we have nothing to give to them. And that could indirectly cause more trauma.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to do that. So my advice is self-care. Whatever that means for you, do it.
And I have a quote too that I wanted to share, which is that I thought was really interesting, and it says, parenting a child who has experienced trauma may require a shift from seeing a bad kid to seeing a child who has had bad things happen to him or her.
Yep. Wow.
That's what
happened to
we,
you?
yeah, there you go. Right, there you go. That's what we need to not only feel with and practice within our families, but also within the community supports, the school systems. We got to get that message out there.
Absolutely.
We hope that everybody enjoyed our show today. It went by really fast, talking about trauma and some resources that are out there, listening to the perspective of different families. If you would like additional information, check out our closing credits at the end of the show, and also check out our website at www.rivillage.org. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you.